Starts to get quiet right at 5 o'clock. Thank you for that. So, welcome to our board meeting. We have a quorum, and tonight I will ask Ms. Bowling if she'll lead us in the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. There it is. We do not have a student board member report tonight. Instead, I have asked our student board members to weigh in when we get to the calendar item on our agenda. So they will be participating in that portion of our agenda. So we will move on to announcements. And before I open it up to board members, I want to make a general statement, and then I will move on to board members for either your own statements or your announcements. All right. Recently, there has been much debate about this Board of Education, indicating that we are not concerned about the academic achievement and success of the students enrolled in charter schools in our district. I believe my colleague, Mr. Pinkston, stated it best when he wrote in a recent article, "The debate isn't about the merits of charter schools, it's about funding adequacy and equity for all schools." It is unfortunate that this Board of Education is being unfairly targeted for performing the duties to which we were duly elected and sworn to uphold. It is also unfortunate that more credibility is being given to contrived propaganda rather than actual facts, such as the following. The current enrollment for students in Metro Nashville Public Schools is nearly 83,000. Included in this number are students enrolled in traditional public schools, magnet schools, specialty schools, and yes, charter schools. The us versus them mentality was not created by, nor does it exist within this Board of Education. The National Association of Charter School Authorizers has acknowledged MNPS as one of the highest performing districts with respect to charter authorization and oversight. Since 2009, the Board of Education has not only approved but supported 16 charter schools currently operating in our district, as well as 6 additional charter schools recently approved. 25% of students enrolled in MNPS are enrolled in charters or other optional schools within our district. The district is proposing a 5-year strategic plan with an aggressive goal of raising the achievement levels of 100% of our students by 2018. 100% is inclusive of all students in our district. The fact is that MNPS is facing a $23 million shortfall in the 2014-2015 school year. Therefore, our school district and this Board of Education will be faced with making very difficult budgetary decisions in the coming months. During the Budget and Finance Committee meeting, Mr. Pinkston laid out some very real concerns related to next year's budget, as well as painting a very realistic picture of the potential budgetary concerns as we move forward, unless we take control of this situation right now. The district cannot afford to continue approving charters on an ad hoc basis without addressing the long-term effects on all of the students we serve. There have been many who claim to hold educating our children as the most important and critical task at hand. Yet some of these same individuals have been instrumental in doing as much as possible to impede the progress of MNPS and other school districts in doing just that unless they become the drivers of change. Let me be very clear on what our mission is. Metropolitan Nashville Public Schools will provide every student with the foundation of knowledge, skills, and character necessary to excel in higher education, work, and life. We embrace and value a diverse population and community. Different perspectives and backgrounds form the cornerstone of our strong public education system. This Board of Education believes in, stands by, and took an oath of office to support this mission, and we will continue to do just that. Thank you. Now, we will move on to any other announcements or from board members. We'll start with Ms. Froeg.
I have several announcements tonight. First of all, I've got some special guests here tonight. My sister-in-law and my niece are here, if you'll stand. Jan Hadelberg is the art teacher at Meg's Middle School, And my niece, Brookty, is a senior this year at Laughlin Design Center. Thank you for coming tonight. Also, I wanted to address some coverage that we've had in the last few weeks, and probably would have done it at the last meeting, but I recently had my wisdom teeth out and was probably not thinking straight. But there have been allegations that the board has been conducting secret meetings, and I think that's a pretty serious allegation, so I thought it was important to address that and say that this board really has done nothing improper. We have not attempted to hide any meetings. And we've tried to have monthly luncheons with Dr. Register. These have just been casual luncheons that have been announced, and they are open to the public. And at these luncheons, we never deliberate on board matters or anything of that nature. And so I think it is very important that, you know, that this board takes transparency seriously, and we do. And I just want to clear the air on any lest there be any doubt that we are attempting to hide our deliberations from the public, because that's certainly not happening. And on a lighter note, I would like to announce that Hands on Nashville Day is coming up. I think we were just talking about that, so I think a lot of us up here are going to be volunteering. It's coming up on September 21st, and you can still register to participate at hon.org. I'm going to be at my school, my children's school, at 7 a.m. With some gardening gloves on, and we'd love people to join us at any of our schools. I might branch out and try some other schools this year too. And then a final announcement is that the YMCA is offering free reading clinics to children ages 6 through 18, which is a really fantastic offering. And so if anybody's interested in that, you can contact the YMCA to get involved. And that's my last announcement.
Thank you.
Tonight, Joseph, who's in the front row. Ross Brown Todd law firm.
Ms. Shepherd?
Well, not to be outdone, I'll be participating in Hands on Nashville as well. I'll be painting at DuPont Hadley Middle School. I want to say a huge thank you to Dr. Steele. He was at DuPont Hadley Middle School recently at their chamber luncheon, and he introduced them to the academy model for our zoned high schools. And there were a lot of good questions, a lot of good information, and I really do appreciate your being there, Dr. Steele. And also, we had, the same week, last Thursday, we had the Taste of the Towns at DuPont Hadley. I see a pattern going there. And this is a great event. It's standing room only, and the proceeds go to the 3 schools that are in Old Hickory. Mark your calendars for Saturday and Sunday, October 5th and 6th, for the Fall Fest to be held at Hermitage, and there will be a lot of children's activities there. The Stack Box Mural Project is there. We're competing for a Guinness Book of World Records on that. I have a lot of schools that are painting boxes for that event. Tomorrow morning, I will be at Pennington Elementary School as they kick off their Pennington Pride Bullying Program. And I will be on their radio station, WPEN. And don't forget about the Families First Festival, which is on Monday, September 23rd, from 4:30 to 7:30 at the fairgrounds. And that concludes my announcements.
Ms. Kim? Ms. Barron?
Yes, on Saturday. Band and
Just wanted my colleagues to know that I have been asked to serve on the pre-K committee and attended the first meeting this past week. So we will have representation.
Congratulations.
That concludes our announcements, and we will move on to awards and recognitions. Mark Hill, Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That kind of exploration. It's a huge event. We've been at the convention center all this time, and we're moving to the new Music City Center for this event on October 30th. That enables us to double our exhibit space, essentially, and also increase the number of exhibitors as well. 19 metro schools are going to be participating in this year's event and counting. And it is made possible by literally hundreds of business volunteers, folks from higher education, and the nonprofit community. In fact, last year, those business volunteers clocked over 2,000 volunteer hours putting on this career exploration fair. And also, we have a sponsor, and that's Shoney's Restaurants, because a lot of time and effort is donated, but there are some hard costs that are the reality of an event of this size. Everything from feeding volunteers to hiring the laborers to get the pipe and draping set up for the day. And Shoney's has stepped up a couple years ago and been the title sponsor and underwritten all those hard costs associated with this event so we can make this available free of charge to metro schools and its students. And so on behalf of Shoney's, I have here Anita Martin just to say a few words about Shoney's involvement in this important community project.
Good evening. It is my pleasure to stand before you. I am representing Shoney's as well as our Chairman and CEO, Mr. David Davenport. Unfortunately, he's tied up due to weather. We talked about weather already this evening, and it has impeded his travel. However, it is my pleasure to be here as this is a very important mission of Shoney's to participate. Really since the inception of this program, it falls into our 3 pillars of innovation, simplicity, and giving back to our community. Why is it simple? We believe that by investing in our children, that it helps them prepare. It's really simple. Give them support, give them opportunities, expose them to other careers, and most of them can get a takeaway from that and be directed on a solid path. We get it. And that ties into our mission. We're really dedicated to it as not only in terms of the day of the event, but preparing for the event. But in addition to that, Mr. Davenport donates actually personally $125,000 out of his own monies to this program. We're excited about it, not only that it's again on October 30th and it's at the new Music City Center. We're all excited about being there. If you haven't visited it already, we're really looking forward to going there then. But we're also excited about the over 5,000 students that participate from the academies and as well as the magnet schools. And we're growing in employer participation. We're near 200 employers' participation, and we expect to see that grow. We're in it for the long haul. We see the value of this program, and David is so committed to it, and again, I apologize for his absence, but he wanted to make certain everyone, and he talks about it everywhere he goes, that this is a worthwhile program, and we're proud to partner with you. So, thank you.
Thanks, Anita. So one of the things that the Shoney sponsorship enables us to do is that Of course, the students spend a lot of time in freshman seminar preparing for this experience, but then on the back end, they all write an essay about how the Career Exploration Fair changed the way they think about school and their future. And each school, each participating school picks a winning essay, and that student gets a Shoney's gift card and gets to treat their family out to dinner probably twice because it's a $50 gift card. But then 2 grand prize winners get to read their essay to the CEO champions. And we had those 2 last year's winners, not to read their essays tonight, but just to share with you their personal perspective about how participating in last year's Career Exploration Fair changed their outlook on school and life. And so I have from Hillwood High School in the Academy of Art, Design, and Communications, Chris Warfield here. And then from Glencliff High School's Academy of Medical Science and Research, Destiny Jones. So Chris and Destiny, if you could just step up and just share a few words.
My name is Chris Warfield. I attend Hillwood High School. As you know, I'm in the Arts, Design, Communication Academy. Last year, the career fair provided for me a better look into the variety of businesses within Nashville and also the diverse choices that we have in what we want to pursue as a career. It gave me a much deeper look as far as individual people and what their job could mean to them. Because when I think of a major company, I don't see their actual employees. I just see their movement. I think that the passion each worker has showed deeply for me. But most of all, the urgency of education. That's what I took from it and how important it is to pursue an education rather than just worry about something later, to be very demanding in what you deserve as far as the education goes. It's not stressed enough, I don't think, how important it is to achieve in school in fear that you might not get a career when you're older. And what I took out of it is that the moment is now. You have to get your education now. Thank you for having me.
Hello, I'm Destiny Jones representing Glencliff High School in the Medical Science and Research Academy. I really enjoyed this event because it's a very useful tool for a student to kind of explore what they want to be before they finish high school. So they can pretty much learn about the steps needed to take in order to be successful in that career. And the best thing about it is that you get to go to different stations and ask about particular questions that you might have about the job and pretty much think about whether it's something you would like to do in the future. And it personally helped me a lot because I thought I wanted to pursue one career as a pathologist, but then I discovered I was more interested in radiology. So it's really important to know what you want to be as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank Chris and Destiny, and I want to thank their principals who are here too. Steve Chauncey and Clint Wilson, thank you all for joining us. And if, as a board member, if you have not visited the Career Exploration Fair, I urge you to drop by anytime between 7 a.m. and 2 p.m. on October 30th and check it out. It's pretty cool. Thank you.
And Mark, I will say, I've participated for the last 2 years. We're on track to participate again this year. And I will agree with you. If you have I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Pictures.
Okay.
Next, we will move into our public participation. The board will hear from those persons who have requested to appear on this board, at this board meeting. In the interest of time, speakers are requested to limit remarks to 3 minutes or less. Comments will be timed. Board members will not immediately respond to speakers during the public comment period, but may follow up after the meeting. Speakers are reminded you will be limited to 3 minutes. First up is Charlotte Ellerby.
Hello. Hello. My name is Charlotte Ellerby. My son, Clarkston Ellerby, is a student at Hume Fogg Academic Magnet School. My purpose of speaking to you guys today is because of some incorrect communication and my desire to get a feel of security that my son is going to be allowed to remain at Hume Fogg. On July 22nd, after a summer-long and eventful summer of communication issues regarding MEGs and a different policy between MEGs and MNPS, we determined that MEGs actually submitted to the students and the parents the wrong criteria for entrance into Hume Fogg. My son was granted entrance into Hume Fogg. However, I was very clearly told that in the circumstances that the principal or the Board of Education deemed that he was tardy or absent in any form, unsatisfactory, not necessarily going by the policy, or five or more tardies in a 9-week period, that he could be uprooted from Hume Fogg and sent to his own school. I just want to be sure that he has some security at Hume Fogg and that he cannot be uprooted in the middle of the school year because of tardies or absences, which is something that he did have problems with in the past, but has not been an issue right now, this year. Okay. And just to add to that, I did receive a letter stating that he was granted admission and that he would be allowed to attend. However, he was expected to adhere to the MNPS policy for tardies and absences. However, on the call, I was told that at any point during the school year, not at the end of the 9 weeks, that he could be pulled from the school and sent to his own school, which is Overton. So that is the purpose of my request today, just to make sure that he is secure there in Hume Fogg and that this won't happen without the normal policies and procedures being followed through. Okay? Thank you for your time. Thank you.
My name is Carl Frankel. I'm the father of a second grader at Percy Priest Elementary. I thank you for this opportunity to address you. I'm here to speak on behalf of the balanced calendar. I understand you're going to vote tonight on which calendar to use moving forward. And I want to expand the scope of consideration. Obviously, the most important reason for the approach we've decided to take these past couple of years is because of learning loss over the summer and how that disproportionately affects economically disadvantaged kids. I'm sure you've seen the literature on this. I've included just a little with a handout, but as kids fall lower and lower in SES, they lose more information over the summer, and that accrues over time to result in higher dropout rates, higher rates of not going to college and things like that. And I think it's absolutely great public policy just on that basis alone to go with the balanced calendar. But I did want to speak for another population, which heavily overlaps low SES kids. We know that children of divorce brings economic hardship, but that's not the only concern. We're not economically suffering right now, but my son has had to struggle with some of the same issues. For example, even when there's not conflict in a divorce and there's not, adverse economic circumstances, alternate parents, the parents with whom kids reside during the summer in many cases, they want to have a good time with their kids. They don't want to necessarily roll up their sleeves and read. I'm not saying that to be disparaging. When you've only got 90 days a year with your kid, you want it to be a good time, a fun time, a positive memory. And so there are all kinds of pressures associated with divorce. My second grader is a case in point for the shortening the summer. He had a longer summer. He lost some ground reading. It took him 6 months to catch up. It was a big struggle. And then this past summer was shorter. He still lost ground, but within a month, we caught him back up. Now, of course, part of that is I learned more as a parent how to work with him on his reading, but all the same, the shorter summer makes a difference. There's also an unintended side effect that I wanted to call to your attention, which is that in Tennessee, under Tennessee law, the requirements to start a litigation to change the parenting schedule, there's a very low bar. To change custody, who's the primary parent, who's the alternate parent, very high bar. But to change the parenting calendar, it can just be as simple as, this is somehow not workable, I want to take you to court. Every time you move this calendar around, ask family law attorneys. They will tell you you are creating an uptick in litigations, and these are high conflict families anyway, and the kids suffer. So I'm here today to speak as emphatically as I can. Please go with the balanced calendar. Thank you.
Hello, Madam Chair, School Board, Dr. Register. I'm glad to be back. Haven't seen you guys for a while. Again, I'm here about social media, of course. I'm happy to report district leaders have been working with me to find a way to give me and my students access to Twitter in my classroom. Hopefully access to the whole district isn't far off as well. I'm very excited about this because we're able to connect students with other schools across the planet for trans-world learning. We will be collaborating on research and projects with a speed and ease that isn't available in any other tool. Not only will we communicate with students in other districts who have open access to Twitter, we will also be communicating with scientists who are leading the field in research and topics we learn in class. Textbooks and websites for science can be great, but actually talking to real scientists is even better. And believe it or not, scientists are on Twitter sharing science, not their breakfast. I'm thrilled district leaders have asked me to help find and use effective methods of using social media in the classroom, and I hope to be an effective tool in this. The most important part of collaboration with district leaders will be to find effective ways to teach students proper internet behavior. Sadly, many students and teachers do not understand basics of internet safety and citizenship. Students often post too much or inappropriate information, and teachers have watched too many Dateline episodes and thus avoid social media like a disease. I work hard every year to help students understand the need to build a positive digital footprint. All teachers should be doing the same. There are a number of programs available to teach digital citizenship. iDriveDigital.com teaches students or helps students earn a digital driver's license. CommonSenseMedia.org, students can earn a digital passport. These two options are worth the effort, and the former is free. I believe the idea is suggested in the MNPS Learning Technology Plan. Personally, I would like to get such a program started in the district. Money and resources will be better spent on training teachers and students digital responsibility, rather than using the money for specialized filtering services that undoubtedly inadvertently block valuable learning content. Train the students and open the world to them. I am thrilled to continue serving the students of this town and working in this district. Thank you, board, for your time and support, and thank you, district leaders, for your willingness to help me reach my students through non-traditional methods and take them to a higher level. Questions and comments are encouraged at my email, adam.taylor@mnps.org.
Ronald Reed.
You want me to pass these out now? All right. Well, I didn't really prepare anything to speak. This is a report on the transportation department. I'm a school bus driver, but I was also a transportation engineer in Central Texas in the mid-90s. Just in a nutshell, you're not optimizing your routes. I could probably save you a third on your entire budget straight off the bat. That's how bad it is. You're not doing your preventative maintenance. I could probably extend your fleet life to the full 17 years for a savings of about $30 million over the next 10 years. The corporate culture is absolutely abysmal. I was involved in a whistleblower incident in Central Texas where the board was removed by the legislature. 6 people went to jail. I'm very familiar with how this works, and this culture is actually worse than that one. That's really it. I need you to read this report. It's not a rant. It is not a manifesto. It is as professional as I can, do at this time with the information that I was able to get. Talk to me. Mr. Pinkston, I can get you your $3 million a year. I'm going to leave this here. All right.
Hello, everyone. MPS withheld free and appropriate education by maliciously manipulating enrollment data, attendance records. Infringement of our civil rights has occurred more than one occasion in retaliation for filing a due process hearing that I did so. Some examples, Mark Hayes stated more than 4 times, we will give your daughter appropriate education setting if you drop the due process hearing. Violation of our state put law has been done. We were told that we could move. We did so, yet appropriate education was still withheld. I have been banned from all MPS schools, properties, including central office, for no apparent reason. So I would not be able to tend to my special needs child without permission or an appointment. Bullying and safety violations with failure to report on a special needs student. And the legislative findings are that students learn by example. 49-6-1014, school administrators, facilities, staff, and volunteers who demonstrate appropriate behavior, treating others civilly and respecting and refusing to tolerate harassment, intimidation, or bullying, encourage others to do so as well. John A. was stabbed by a pencil by another student. The teacher did not do anything and failed to report. Also, that principal as well. And I am requesting respectfully for you to do an extensive evaluation and an investigation. Thank you.
Can you hear this? Can you guys hear this okay? Okay, thank you. It just didn't seem like I could hear anything. Okay, what we're going to do. We will start with the chair now. Ms. Shepard.
Madam Chair, I would like to nominate you to serve a second year as chair.
Second. Thank you. Any other nominations for chair? Right, we'll go ahead and vote on that then. All in favor, raise your hands. Aye. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. We'll go ahead now and take nominations for vice chair, and I'd like to nominate Anna Shepard, since she so kindly nominated me. Any other nominations for vice chair? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all so kindly. We do appreciate, or I'll speak for myself. I appreciate your belief in my leadership ability, and believe me, it has been a great ride with every single person on this board, and I wouldn't change it for the world. So thank you all. Ms. Shepard, anything to say?
And I would agree, and I do appreciate, I thoroughly have enjoyed serving as the vice chair and appreciate your support. It has been fun, and so I appreciate being able to serve another year. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will move on now to consent agenda. Ms. Shepard.
Approval of minutes, 8/13/13 regular meeting. B, recommended award of contract for roof replacement of sections A and B at Belshire Elementary School, Roofing Services and Solutions, Inc., MBOE 800-135.13.1R. C, change order number 1 for football field lighting package number 4 at Antioch, Hillwood, and Pearl Cone High Schools, Knight Electric, MBOE 13-009. 9. D, awarding of bids and contracts. 1, Aspect Solutions, Inc. 2, Beeman Automotive. 3, Claim Technologies Incorporated. 4, Curriculum Associates. 5, Equipment Finders, Inc. 6, Georgia State University. 7, JJ and Zach LLC. 8, Lipscomb University. 9, Mid-South Bus Center, and 10, Mid-South Bus Center. E, recommended approval of request for compulsory attendance waiver. F, Energy Efficient Schools Initiative grant acceptance. G, recommended approval of 2013-14 extended learning contract. H, recommended approval of special textbook adoptions, aquaculture, hydroponics, and criminal justice. And J, recommended approval of legal settlement claim C-30326 for $11,400. Madam Chair, I recommend that we accept the consent agenda as read.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Now we will move on to district calendar, the recommendation for approval of the 2014-15 district calendar. Dr. Register.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Congratulations to you and to Ms. Shepherd for being reelected. We look forward to your leadership during the coming year. I would I'll just make some general remarks about this and be very brief and then open it up for conversation. As you know, my original recommendation was to recommend a balanced calendar, and I still support that option. I think the gentleman who spoke very eloquently about some of the advantages that we have. But this is an issue that has very mixed opinion, very mixed feelings, and I know in our community, I know among our teachers and principals and parents that there are differences of opinion. So we developed also an optional calendar, a compromise calendar, if you will, that also incorporates a number of the features of the balanced calendar that we think's very appropriate. There are some guiding principles that were presented to you with the calendar, the two options that you've been given, and I will make a comment about those guiding principles for each of the calendars, and then turn it back over to you for your consideration. The principles for the 2014-15 compromise calendar, and I usually don't refer to people who make comments, but the gentleman who made comments made a very important point. We need to be consistent from year to year. We need for our parents, whatever option we choose, and I've heard many of you say this, we need to be very consistent as we go from year to year so people know what to expect beyond 1 year. And the principles for the compromise calendar are these. Each year, school begins on the first Wednesday of August. Whenever possible, the school year will end prior to Memorial Day. And over a 7-year period of time, that generally falls about half of the time, half of the number of years. We'll have to go to school 1 or 2 days after Memorial Day, in the week after Memorial Day. And for the other half of the years, the Memorial Day actually comes after the last day of school. 1 week for fall break, the first or second week of October, 2 weeks at winter break, and 8 days for spring break with 3-day intercession, and that spring break would come the 3rd or 4th week of March. The balanced calendar has these features. The principles for the balanced calendar going forward: 9 weeks on, that's a quarter, and 2 weeks off. 4-day, and essentially that's 4-day intercessions at the beginning of a 2-week fall and spring break. School begins no earlier than August 1st. School will end in May. Those intercession breaks come at the end of the first 9 weeks, the winter break and the third 9 weeks. When you look at the two proposals, there's not a great deal of difference, but I think the difference is the details are very important. So you've got those two options. I'll be glad to answer any questions about it, about these options, and look forward to the conversation.
Okay, before we get into board members' comments, I'd like to hear from our student board members. Ms. Boland, we're going to start with you. I've asked our student board members to weigh in on what they think of these calendar options, because after all, it's going to be the students who are going to be living this calendar. So, Ms. Boland?
Well, I talked to some of my friends at school, and we actually thought about going to school like later in August, but leaving early in May, because for some of us, we would like to still have our summer days, just chill out and have a good time, but also summer programs that we would like to do, even though it gets in the way of school because we start too kind of early, August 1st, but I think it'll be helpful for us to kind of start school in school later, so we can still have those opportunities for summer activities and programs that we would like to do.
Thank you. Mr. Eo.
First of all, I'd like to begin by saying thank you to the board members for allowing Marquetta and I to voice our opinions regarding the calendars. As for myself, if I had to choose between the intersession calendar and the extended calendar, I would go with intersession. I think it's definitely the better of the two. The option of the long fall and spring breaks or intersession is a great way to do, as the name of the intersession calendar suggests, put forth a compromise for the students that may need the extra help. And I asked that the board would even consider the traditional calendar and the benefits that it had starting around mid-August as well. And I've also been talking with fellow students at my school, MLK Magnet, and students from other schools as well. And I wanted to briefly share a few of their opinions in addition to my own. So one student said the following: I think the 5 extra days would be pointless, especially because it would cost the school extra money that it doesn't have. Until MLK gets attention to the condition of its building, adding extra days should be the last thing on its mind. Also, summer was way too short this year. So this student was really concerned with sort of the budgeting that's going to go in with intersession, especially since MLK, the condition of MLK isn't in tip-top shape, and really the student was basically saying that it should focus, the board should focus on, repairing the schools and using the apparently $20 to $21 million for the added days to improving the conditions of the school. And another student said, let's go with the intersession calendar. It makes more sense to have days off in the spring because that's when everyone is cramming for AP tests at home. So this student was really thinking about the end of course tests and the AP tests and all the standardized tests that we have at the end of the school year, and thought it would be a lot better to have the intersession calendar, because the intersession calendar, it puts more days off in the spring break, which allow students to study at home and to prepare for those tests. And also, one last student said, I like the long breaks, but it has severely limited my options during the summer to have an early start date and later ending date. I was considering multiple camps or academic programs in my areas of interest last year, most of which I couldn't do because of our school's dates. So the student was interested in doing like internships and camps and academic programs during the summer, but because the school year started so early in August, then she wasn't able to participate in those because it would interfere with her attendance at school for that first week. So just in conclusion, I think the intersession, out of the two, between the extended option and the intersession calendar, the intersession would be the optimal choice.
Thank you so
To board members for comments on calendars.
So they asked for the traditional calendar, but yet they said that they would be open to a compromise calendar. So I think personally that the compromise calendar, especially since we've got pretty close to a 50-50 split there, that the compromise calendar is a good way of having the aspects that both sides appreciate in a calendar.
Any other comments? Ms. Froh?
I have a question. So as far as intercession goes, where are we with regard to funding for intercession, including transportation?
That's been a real challenge for us, and you'll see that this year because we have a balanced calendar this year. I've got to go back to say that when we originally developed the balanced calendar, we anticipated about $8 million in federal funding for supplemental educational services that would be available, and that funding was cut from the federal budget. That's 2 years ago now. So the funding would be less than what we would like to have. We will be able to dedicate some funds to that this year, but not nearly to that's the biggest disappointment that we had with the balanced calendar last year. I will say, though, that there's some other things going on that are very positive. For one, our community partners, the YMCAs, all of the organizations that provide youth services across the community are really stepping up, and I think what we'll see is a higher level of offerings in the intercessions this year than what we had last year. I know Mr. Coverstone's working with the iZone schools, and they actually have school improvement grant money. So we've got, how many, Mr. Coverstone? 7 schools that will actually have school for all children in those schools on the intercession days. That's really important because those are schools that are typically described as low-performing schools. Transportation was provided last year. I don't know the extent to which we'll be able to do that this year, but what we've done is we've asked principals to let us know if they have particular needs for transportation, then we'll try to provide that for them. And Mr. Carr's worked with our transportation people to try to do that. So it's less than perfect. I guess the final thing I'll say is that intercession is not the only reason for having a balanced calendar.
And if we were to go with a compromised calendar where we only have 3 days of intercession, I would anticipate that we'd be able to fully fund that plus transportation. Much
better level of funding for those 3 days of intercession. And what we would do with that proposal, and I really like this one in this regard, is we have 3 days there and then a week, and I think we could do a good job of providing remediation and extra time for students who need that prior to testing.
Would we have extra funds, do you think, left over for other interventions at this point, or is that something we'd have to factor in later?
I don't think it's one or the other. We need to provide funding for interventions, and we're working on that as a part of our regular budget in addition to intercession time.
Mr. Pinkston.
Thank you. As I said during last month's work session, I'm just not inclined to go in a different direction just for the sake of making a change. If there was some clear and compelling fiscal or operational reason to switch gears, I'd be open to hearing the rationale. Or if there was some evidence-based research that says doing something different is going to benefit our students academically, then I would obviously be open to that. But I'm not hearing any argument. And as we know, as Ms. Spearing pointed out, public opinion is pretty evenly split on this. So all things being equal, I'm inclined to just stay the course. I think what makes it really hard on parents and families and what makes them most frustrated with us is when we just change things right as folks are getting settled into routines. So unless there's some compelling reason to change that we haven't talked about, I'm going to vote to stay the course with the balanced calendar. Thank you.
Ms. Shepherd?
I'll say I'm really still conflicted. I've received a lot of feedback from teachers, parents both, on the balanced calendar, it was upsetting to hear some of my teachers say that some of their fourth graders were staying by themselves because for the lack of transportation to intercession, for the lack of daycare opportunities for them. That's way too young for a child to stay by themselves. Some had some complaints on some of the intercessions not being well attended, even though they provided their own transportation to them. And I've had, I think the calendar the compromise calendar, I think is kind of the best of both worlds. Being a former band parent, I will tell you that it's very difficult for band directors to have 2 weeks off because you still have to practice, you still have to go to competitions in the fall. I think the athletics are experiencing the same frustration. So probably not like Mr. Pinkston, I probably vote for the traditional one just for those reasons. Compromise, I'm sorry.
Mr. Hayes?
Excuse me, feedback on Ms. Brogue's questions and comments around physical implications of both calendars. So you briefly said we might have more money to fully fund the intercession with the compromise calendar. I'm assuming that's federal funds, not. Are the calendars net neutral, I guess is my question. And we're
Yes.
spread
Yes, they are.
Thank you.
Dr. Brannon?
Yes, my question. Compromise calendar affect the 9 weeks on and 9 weeks off? Is it throw it off just a little bit?
If I understand your question, it does not. You'll have the 9-week schedule and then a fall break, 9-week schedule and then a winter break, 9 weeks,
Okay.
and
That's
then
the
spring
compromise.
break. Yes.
I attended the public hearing on the calendar and know that the results of having this compromise was because of some of the comments that were made, and I think this would appeal to the parents because concessions have been made and you're open to the suggestions on the early interventions for students prior to school. So I favor the compromise schedule.
Any other comments? Ms. Brogue?
I know we discussed the idea that whatever we vote on is something we will try to sustain. Are we voting on just 1 year? Or are we anticipating it'd be, I mean, whatever calendar we adopt tonight, are we planning to sustain that for 3 years?
My recommendation to you would be to adopt the calendar of your choice and the guiding principles that are associated with those so that we can develop 3 years, 4 years out worth of calendars to bring to probably put on the consent agenda for approval each year, following those guiding principles.
Any additional questions? Is there a recommendation for approval of the calendars? We'll start with, I'm sorry, Ms. Shepherd, go ahead.
I would like to make a motion that we adopt the compromise calendar with the set of principles to guide us throughout the rest of the years.
Is there a second? Second. Okay, we've got a motion on the floor and a second to adopt the compromise calendar with the guiding principles. I'm writing, give me just a second here. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? No. All right, so we have 7 for and 1 opposed, so the motion passes. And Dr. Register, we have approved the compromise calendar.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Recommendation of approval of Education 2018 Strategic Plan. Dr. Register.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You have in your folders or in your packets some information on the strategic plan, and that's titled Education 2018 Excellence for Every Student. And we have, let me go back and just very briefly, I'm not going to do a presentation tonight because you just had a full work session on this topic. 2 board work sessions on the strategic plan, and we've had quite a bit of teacher principal involvement with focus groups over the last 6 months in bringing forth this plan. I'm very comfortable bringing the strategic plan to you tonight. But for the benefit of the viewing audience, I'll make just a few comments about it. The process really started last February. It started with a restructuring of the central office, and since that time, we have been developing this next 5-year plan, if you will, for the school district. You've seen the strategic plan. There are, and I'll just at a very high level hit a few of the important components of this. There is our goal is to become the best urban school system in the United States by the year 2018, and that means a quality school system for every one of our students in our district. And we've developed quite an extensive set of action strategies. You've had an opportunity in the past to look at those action strategies to see in detail, to some extent, what we're proposing, what we think works. At the last meeting, we presented a theory of system change for you and characteristics of our graduates from 4th grade to 8th grade to high school, and a theory of action that's shown here. We believe that personalized learning for each one of our 83,000 students is the lever of change. That's the way we find success at a very high level for each one of our students. Personalized learning can become a trite phrase if you don't define it, if you don't understand very clearly what we're talking about. And so I want to read what we mean by personalized learning. Learning experiences that strengthen relationships, value every learner, raise expectations for learning, and customize content and instruction to meet learners' diverse needs, interests, and strengths. We think if we can accomplish that, then our students will be successful, every one of them. We want all of our students to grow academically, socially, and emotionally every year. We want every one of our students to achieve. We want to know that all of our students are achieving at high academic standards, and we want to empower our students. And we empower our students by giving them a voice and choices and ownership in their own learning experiences. And that's we want our students to be very actively engaged in thinking about their educations and their futures. I think that's a powerful concept as we go forward. There are basically 3 strategies, 3 fundamental strategies that have quite a bit of complexity in each one of those, but I'll mention these 3 strategies. Quality teachers, every one of them in every school. Quality teachers, and that's building professional quality across our workforce. Equity and excellence. We've already talked about equity tonight. Equity is not the same thing as equal. That means providing in every one of our schools the resources that are necessary for children in each one of those schools to be successful. And then transformational leadership. We have to have great leaders. We have to have great teachers and great leaders in our schools. That's the heart and soul of the theory of change that we're developing now in the school system. And so I point then to the characteristics. So what does it look like? What do our students look like? What do we want our students what characteristics do we want our students to exhibit when they leave elementary school and progress into middle school, and when they leave middle school and progress into high school, and when they graduate from high school? And so if you look at the graphs up here, the characteristics of a 4th grade graduate, we want every one of our students, 1, to be ready for middle school. 2, to be on track for a 16 on Explorer. That's the pre-ACT test. On track at 16 gets you to a 21 when you take ACT, a minimum of that. We want our elementary children to have social and emotional readiness. And that's something that too often we forget in the world of testing that we live in now. But we need to make sure that our children are socially and emotionally developed. Many of our children have many needs, and we cannot neglect that education of the whole child. To have a completed technology portfolio and to complete a service learning activity or experience at the elementary level. For our characteristics of our 8th grade graduate, to be ready for high school, to score that 16 on Explorer, to be actively engaged in school and extracurricular activities. We're dealing with early adolescence, and it is very important for every one of them to have something that they're totally engaged in and involved in and enjoy and are motivated to do. I want to commend the mayor and the Board of Education and many people in this community for a program like Music Makes Us. Music Makes Us gives great opportunity for many of our children to be involved very deeply in very meaningful activities, and that's a terrific program for the middle grades. We need to think about programs like athletics, maybe intramurals, where every student has an opportunity to be engaged in something beyond just academics. Of course, we want academic success also. To be technology ready, moving out of 8th grade, to be ready to use the technology. And we heard a great presentation from one of our great teachers at Overton High School tonight about use of technology. That's an advantage that every one of our students need when they get ready to leave us. And to complete a service learning project at the middle school level. And again, engagement and social emotional development of our students. And then for our characteristics of a high school graduate, a minimum of 21 on the ACT. That qualifies you for a Hope Scholarship. That's very important for a lot of our children. A plan for post-secondary education and career. When our students leave high school, we want them to have a plan in hand. We want them to have an idea of where they're headed and what they need to do to get there. A minimum of one online course. Think about the use of the technology and the blended learning that goes on there. That's the world of work of the future, and we want our students to be prepared for that. A work-based service learning project or a capstone research project. Too many times in the past, we've heard about the senior slide year, where and a lot of times it's the very bright students that'll pack all their academic requirements in and be almost through, virtually through by the end of their junior year, and slide the senior year. We don't need a senior slide. We need to take advantage of every minute that we have with them, and a capstone research project or a work-based service learning project can really enhance that senior year. We think that goes quite right along with state increases in academic requirements also. I'll put in a plug that's not in this. No student needs to go into their senior year and not take a math course if they're going on to college. They do not need a gap year from mathematics education, and we have that now at this point in time. So those are the characteristics that we have. I could talk about this strategic plan a lot longer. Let me use slang. I'm pumped up about it. I think it's a great way for us to spend our next 5 years seeing this strategic plan come to fruition. Be glad to answer any questions or ask someone else to help me answer questions.
Any questions from board members? Seeing none, I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry. Next question. Okay, so this is kind of piggybacking on what Ms. Kim mentioned earlier in our budget meeting. If we adopt this plan tonight, and I too am pumped about it, so I say that on the front end. Is this something that we can sort of tweak as we move along? Because I do like the idea of the board continuing to have a discussion about our goals, and I don't think we've really gotten where we need to be on that. And I'm frankly not even sure that, I've been sort of addressing that through the policy governance meetings, and this may be a better forum for us to just have that publicly, but I just wondered how that might all fit together.
It absolutely is a working document. It's a document that will continue to develop. There are pieces in it that aren't developed now, but it's also very thoroughly developed with a lot of action plans from staff involvement and engagement. But yes, we want to continue to tweak this or to modify it as we go along so that we're still aiming very high and we're still using the strategies, action strategies, I'm sure will be modified as we look from year to year at those things that are working and those things that aren't working. And also related to a point that Ms. Kim made in the work session earlier is this absolutely needs to drive where we go with our budget and how we deal with that and how we strategically use our budget to implement this plan over the next 5 years.
Ms. Shepherd?
And I think
I'm sorry, Ms. Ferg, were you done?
Okay. I think I asked this last time. We would get quarterly updates or
Yes.
timely updates?
We and I don't have it in front of me tonight, but there is a regularly scheduled reporting schedule that will cover all parts of this. And then the other thing that that Ms. Kim is working on now is my evaluation, and we're making significant modifications to that so that my evaluation will be directly tied to the strategic plan and the goals that are set there.
Thank you.
Ms. Spear?
I too am, I like the word you're using, pumped about this. I still would like to know and see more about the how. And I know that it's a living, breathing document that will continue to change. But as we're getting these updates, will there be a focus on the how at that point?
I think there will be all along, and pardon me for doing this, but I'll show this one pager that on the theory of change that identifies 9 goals. I think this begins to get there. What we also want you to do, and we haven't cut it on yet, but it is an electronic document so that you can take any component of the strategic plan and delve all the way into the action strategies or the set of action strategies that are being used. Now, we're probably a couple of weeks away from being able to cut that on for you, but you'll be able to see in great detail what strategies we think are going to work, and you will get periodic updates on those.
Sounds great. And I also want to commend you on, this is a lot of information, and it's very broad and it's very deep. And to be able to say these are our top 3 goals, I think is outstanding. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional comments? Dr. Brennan?
We used to have to submit proposals similar to this to the state. So does this align with all that the state is requesting?
We're in the yes, it's a negotiation with the state now, and those are school improvement plans. We actually had a meeting last week with the State Department of Education, and there have been several meetings going on between various members of our leadership team and the State Department of Education. They're actually quite impressed with the strategic plan and want to see us merge the two, if you will. Our goal, and I think there's no question that we're going to do this, is we'll have one plan, which is a great improvement.
That's right. That's right. I agree.
Any additional comments? Ms. Kim?
I love the top line buckets: quality teachers, equity and excellence, transformational leaders. All of that very deeply resonates with me. And I love that you said that transformational leaders are the heart and soul of the theory of change. That pumps me up. Okay, so with that said, I was thinking of ways or things to be mindful of as we go through execution. And as you were saying, there's going to be, I'm sure, evolutions as we learn more and whatnot. So yes, it sounds like we're all agreeing that there's no, hard and fast set of strategies, et cetera. I think one potential danger, that I'm hearing sort of from the street, so to speak, from teachers, is that, a long-term teacher in a school close by where I live, was asking me questions about whether or not personalized learning would end up devolving into a lot of paperwork, because that is how it came down to her. And I admit I did not have an answer to that. I said, I hope not, because the point isn't to produce more paperwork. Right. But I think there's a real danger in all of this is to become super processy, and it misses sort of the spirit of what we're trying to do. And so it's just a cautionary thing from the ground. And I heard something similar at one of my high schools as well. There's just this fear that it'll turn into lots of mandates and paperwork.
So, may I respond? I'm not sure you're through, but let me tell you where we are in the process, and I think this is very important. We, over the course of the summer and for the last 3 or 4 months, we've had a fair amount of engagement. Our principals we've had general sessions with our principals twice in the last 2.5 months to cover this. And we've had focus groups with parents, we've had focus groups with teachers, but it has not been disseminated. We're just now at the point of beginning to have this conversation in all of our schools with all of our teachers. If we stop that dissemination where we are today, this plan fails. And so it's very important, and the last conversation we had with our principals was, help us begin to spread this plan through the school system. And we still are working with our principals to give them the information and the toolkit, if you will, to engage all of our teachers and to engage our parents in this process. And I think that's the very important next steps that we have to take now. And I'm not surprised at that reaction at this point in time if it's a teacher, and most of our teachers weren't involved in a focus group. It's very important now that we continue to spread this through the school system internally with our principals, with our school-based leaders, and our central office staff, and that we also spread it in the community.
Go
ahead.
It's around, actually, speaking of change management, which I'm sure a number of us probably have been in some, I'm sure at Nissan, some involved in some giant change management effort of some type. And it's interesting to think through what you're getting at, is that what does this really mean to the person on the ground who's trying to execute and bring their game to a different level? And I do think that involves that it's not a technical challenge, it's an adaptive challenge, and it requires like sort of engagement of just like mind, emotion, lots of more than just like reading it on a piece of paper and saying, oh, okay, I see the plan, I intellectually agree with it, but like real engagement. So anyway, I can imagine that is having led various change efforts that were not successful because I underestimated the degree to which the person on the ground is like truly embraced and engaged and had an opportunity to make meaning of it themselves. Yeah, it's just another thing to keep in mind. But then one final thing too is, I think what I love about this is that it sort of tees us up to have a conversation just about what the broader ecosystem needs to be in order for us to live this out. Because again, and I'm talking to teachers and principals constantly about just really what enables them to do great work. It does seem that, I mean, they would, by the way, bring up these big buckets, in terms of you need great teachers, equity and excellence would come up in some way, shape, or form, and then you need transformational leaders who are casting a vision and driving towards that vision. They would also talk about the feel of the place, and the ecosystem that enables them to do, not just have the people in place, but to have them thrive. And so it would be a fun conversation to discuss, and a strategic conversation, I think, to figure out like what are the components of that ecosystem. And some of it is tied to the budget that we were talking about, or the student-based budgeting that we talked about earlier, is just giving actual budget autonomy so that we're treating our leaders, like CEOs, so that they have that. So that's a piece of it. But then it's also about not feeling as though they're being mandates are coming down to them. Sort of from afar. I mean, that's the most common, by far, complaint that I hear, is that they want autonomy of, not just budget, but also how they should go about reaching the goal. And in exchange for that autonomy, they'll take accountability. Like, they're not as scared of accountability, but they really want to be able to exercise the leadership and judgment and good sense that they possess, and get coached along the way in doing that. And if it doesn't work out, well, that might suggest a different problem. But I feel like that's it's just about creating that ecosystem to make all of this actually happen. So, yeah, and then of course, yes, tying it to the budget. Which, yes.
And I will agree with you. The top-down approach does not always work, especially when you're talking about incorporating such a huge plan. You have to understand who is on the ground and how they're currently working and how this overall plan is going to work for them. The top-down, bottom-up approach, you meet in the middle, I think it'll work out a lot better. But I think we have to consider the bigger picture of it all. So I agree with you. Thank you for that. Any other comments? Any other comments? All righty. So we have a recommendation for approval of Education 2018 Strategic Plan. Is there a motion?
I so move.
There is a motion on the table. Second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you very much.
Motion passes.
Next 5 years will be fun.
Thank you.
You promise?
Absolutely.
Okay. We will move into the director's report now. Dr. Register.
Thank you very much. Based on some questions from some board members and a change that's going through our district now that's being phased in, and it's called the Grading for Learning policy, some change in grading procedures. I've asked Jay Steele to give the board some information. We're probably going to take about 15 minutes or so. You're bringing up a lot of people, Jay, to help you, so we'll try to keep it to 15 minutes. But to talk a little bit about the Grading for Learning policy that's being implemented in the school system now, and I've asked Jay to give you a little bit of background on this and then ask for your presentation.
Well, the conversation that you just had leads right into this, because this was a bottom-up initiative and not a top-down initiative, as many people are reporting. So I want to speak to you tonight about a changing culture. This changing culture is student grading, a very controversial topic. However, it is a much-needed conversation. School improvement expert Bob Marzano asked, why would anyone want to change current grading practices? The answer is quite simple. Grades are so imprecise that they are almost meaningless. Every state in the U.S. has educational standards, which are public statements of expected outcomes of learning. That is, what students are expected to know, understand, and be able to do. So the goal is for every student to meet or exceed standards, which means the student is competent or proficient in every aspect of the curriculum. The key to reaching the goal is to evaluate every student's achievement using similar criteria, constantly applied at all levels. In 2011-12, the middle schools piloted grading for learning, and then in 2012-13, adopted grading for learning for all middle schools. It was met with criticism, it was met with skepticism, and embraced by many. Now the students who have experienced this method of grading have entered 9th grade. In the summer of 2013, the high school principals voted unanimously to adopt grading for learning and a new grading scale of 50 to 100. I was not even in the room when this was done. The principals made this decision, and then it was driven by the principals, and then it was brought to me. This was not a top-down initiative. The only thing that I asked each and every one of them was, do every one of you support it? And I point blank asked certain principals, do you support it, because they lead high schools that this would majorly impact? The answer was yes, 100% unanimous. At that point, which was mid-July, we developed the policy and had it ready for dissemination after pre-planning had started. A Monday is when executive staff approved it. It was disseminated to all teachers and principals that week. There are two essential questions that all educators should ask about their grades. How confident am I that the grades students get in my classroom, school, or district are accurate, meaningful, and consistent, and that they support learning? How confident am I that the grades I assign students accurately reflect my school's, district's published content standards and desired learning outcomes? According to author Ken O'Connor, the answers to these questions in America's middle and high schools are not very or not at all in his research. I'll give you a personal story of my algebra teacher, and I'm glad that it's not televised live tonight because she is retired, but she's still in the viewing area. And she actually attends my parents' church, so I see her on Sundays sometimes. None of the students in my algebra class could master the standards. Many hired tutors, many parents had conferences, and many studied hard. However, we could still not master the standards. In order not to hurt our GPAs, the teacher curbed our grades to artificially inflate our scores so the top students, regardless of the numerical average received, got an A. I was one of those kids. I graduated with the math award, I graduated salutatorian, but still to this day, I do not know algebra as well as I should. So I did not master the standard, but I got an A. So O'Connor says that effective grades need to meet 4 overarching criteria for success. They must be accurate, meaningful, and consistent, and they must support learning. Grades must be accurate reflections of student achievement, and they must communicate useful information. They must also be consistent across teachers and support true learning. It should not be about doing the work or assigning points for simply turning the work in. It's about learning and mastery of standards. So the new grading scale went into effect in all schools for all students. However, the new grading for learning concept, 2 separate things, was implemented at the principal's discretion as a pilot. So principals had the autonomy to implement as they felt. Some started small with a core group of teachers, and some embraced the change school-wide. So I'm going to ask Dr. Amy Downey tonight to talk about the research. She's working with all the schools K-12 to implement this practice. So Amy?
Thank you. There's many researchers, renowned educators who have done a lot of work toward this, names such as Thomas Guskey, Robert Marzano, Carolyn Tomlinson, Douglas Reeves. There's a wealth of information on this topic. But Thomas Guskey says there are 4 advantages to this system. It's the only grading method based on a theory of learning. It is aligned with teachers' instructional purposes. It brings clarity to grade interpretation. And it is similar to what most students will face throughout their lives. We all learn from our mistakes. Grading is communication toward standard mastery. It's toward mastery of a standard. Grades should be used to provide feedback, document progress, and guide instruction. Robert Marzano says, the grading plan must provide students, parents, administrators, and others clear feedback as to the achievement of each student. Practices that distort clear communication of standard mastery are grading for student behaviors, for reducing points on late work, for extra credit, for including attendance in grades. There's solutions to that, and the solutions would be to include only achievement, don't include student behaviors. Accept late work and grade on the quality of the work. You can give some other consequence for a student being late with assignments. Seek evidence that more work has resulted in a higher achievement level. Organize and report evidence by standard, not by traditional assessment methods. And don't include zeros in grade determination when evidence is missing or as a punishment. Use alternatives such as reassessing, helping students achieve mastery. We're going to hear from some principals tonight about their experience and how they implemented the new policy. We'll start with Clint Wilson from Glencliff. Then we will hear from Dr. Kevin Armstrong from DuPont Hadley Middle School. Then from Tracy Bruno from Lytton Middle School. Dr. Kelly Hargis from Hume Fogg High School. And Dr. Adrian Battle-Koger from Antioch High School.
Thank you for your time to speak on this. This is something I'm truly passionate about, and my journey started years ago, not as an educator, but as a parent. I walked into my daughter's, I believe she was in 3rd grade at the time, classroom for a teacher conference, and on the board it said, help your kid get a great start, bring in a box of Kleenex, get 5 points added to your grade, bring in hand sanitizer, get 10. And I started thinking, what does this grade mean for my daughter? And the teacher, all she could say is, your child is such a great child. She's done everything. She's got an A. I said, okay, what does my kid know? What do they not know? Why do you care your kid's got an A? I said, I care because I want to know that she's ready for the next level. So I started looking and researching, what can I do now in my job to where a grade means and matters for something? And I could quote a lot of what Dr. Steele and stated from Marzano and all the research I looked at, and I started looking and realized standards-based grading, which we're calling grading for learning, was the way to go. So I stood up in a faculty meeting and said, How many of you want to change the conversation that you have with your kids' teachers and in your classroom? Do you want to go in and say your child's got a D because they owe me these 3 assignments, or your child has a D because he can't graph linear equations, he can't solve 2-step equations? What conversation do you want to have? If you want to have that second conversation, join me as we look at moving toward grading for learning. I already had teachers in my building doing it. They didn't have a plan. They just realized that was best practice for them to do so. So I had 15 teachers volunteer to go visit another school south of us and see this in practice. I took them to lunch afterwards and says, this was about November. I said, when do you want to start? Do you want to start? They're like, we're starting in January. That has spread through my school like kudzu. It went crazy. Everybody then started getting on board. We didn't have a formal plan. This was teacher-driven, in that they saw the value of having conversations with kids about what they do and don't know and empowering them to learn it on their own. Since then, we are not completely school-wide. It's not something that we have forced, but we have grown to 3/4 of our staff now doing this, and we'll go to 100% next school year. So what began as a personal journey for me as a parent, I'm now proud to say Glencliff High School has embraced to help all of our students. Thank you.
Good evening, chamber members and, I'm sorry, school board members. Wrong meeting. And Dr. Register. We were approached in the fall of 2011-2012 school year by Dr. Downey about grading for learning. And immediately we saw the impact that it could have on our school. We jumped in January 2012, full school implementation. After talking to our teachers, they were very excited. And one of the first things that we saw was the removal of the fluff, extra credit. We did not give a grade below a 50 on a summative assessment, and we immediately started to see students that were more motivated. It's a lot easier to go from a 50 to an 80 than it is to go from a 10 to an 80. And we immediately started to see a correlation between students' grades and their test scores. And no longer did we see students that had 95 averages but were scoring below basic in math and literacy. And our teachers were really excited because they had an opportunity to reassess students. Our first year, when we did not have an intervention period, we had a lot of students that were reassessing during lunchtime. They would voluntarily give up their last 5 minutes or 10 minutes of lunch to go back and reassess. We now have a period that's dedicated for that at the end of the day, and our students have really taken that to task. Our parents bought in. We were very upfront with them, and we explained that to them. The community members have bought in. We have not had any issues with that at all. But we are on board. Like I said, we've been we've been fully implemented since January 2012, and we just love it in middle schools. We have a reassessment form that goes home to parents that stipulates the standards that their child is reassessing, and actually the steps that they need to take before they come back and reassess. And they usually come back 3 to 4 days later and they reassess, and if they score higher on the second go around than they do on the first one, then that grade replaces the first one. So there's an initiative to students, but we just don't come right back 30 minutes later and give them the same test. It's the same standards, but of course the questions are different than they were the first time. So thank you.
Good evening. I think it's important to note what Kevin just said about the steps between the first assessment and the second assessment. You know, when we first piloted this a couple of years ago, the big concern with teachers and parents was, well, my kid's just not going to study. They're just going to take it over and over again until they get a good grade. The idea is to put the onus of responsibility on the student to give the initiative so they do it right the first time, and then not, there's an assessment first, and then they are responsible for the additional steps and the work that it takes in order to take that assessment again and pass. The fact of the matter is, at Isaac Litton Middle School, we adopted this because we didn't want anybody to fail and repeat a grade. Dr. Downey gave some great statistics. If a child fails one time, there's a 75% chance they don't graduate high school. If they fail twice, that's a 0. They won't graduate high school. So we felt it was our duty to implement this best practice in our school. A lot of parents I know across the district have said, well, this isn't real life experience. And I asked them, how many of you failed your driver's test the first time? And what happened the second time? You got to take it again. Did they ever do it with the first one? No, they did not. They let you take it again and again until you pass it. So that is real life. And so this is real life also. And, you know, I am proud to say that at Isaac Litton, for the first time since I've been there, not one student failed a grade last year because we refused to let them fail. And if it took, you know, like I said, lunchtime, pulling them after school, whatever it took to let them know that we were not going to just let them fall by the wayside and repeat grades, and we cared about them. They hone in on that, and they understand that we do this because we care about them in the long run, and we want to see them achieve. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Kelly Hargis, and I am the principal at Hume Fogg. It's a pleasure to be here speaking with you, and I want to personally thank each of the board members, and thank you, Dr. Register. Board members, thank you for having an interest in what we're doing in our schools and asking questions. So at Hume Fogg, as my colleagues have told you before I stepped up, we are doing a pilot form of standards-based grading, or grading for learning as we call it here in Metro Nashville. And we were allowed the ability to make that decision as to how we wanted to roll that out. I'll tell you that last November, I have a teacher who's been doing standards-based grading the whole time I've been there, and was doing it before I came there when my predecessor, Paul Fleming, was there, Dr. Fleming. And so Mr. Montenegro is that teacher. He's a science teacher, and he came to me, and with passion, he told me how he had adopted this and this practice, and that he was very interested in extending his leadership within the school, and would I be open to him simply sharing what he does with our faculty members at a faculty meeting. And of course I applauded his reaching out and advocacy for increasing his leadership within our school, and said of course I would give you that opportunity. He did so, and I'll be quite honest with you. The first reaction of my academic magnet teachers the first question was a question to me, and it is he speaking because you're going to make us do this in January? Because we did this in our December in-service. And I came back and I said, no, this isn't something I'm forcing. We're not doing that. But I want you to hear, this is just his way of sharing his practice, and we all grow together and collaborate and hopefully are stronger because of it. So then they were open to it, and they listened. And some seemed to like it right off the bat, and others were trepidatious. And so what do you want us to do with this? And I said, I don't want you to do anything with it, but if you're interested, I encourage you to learn more. And Mr. Montenegro wants to meet with anybody who's interested, and you all will do it without me. And you all will research this and unpack it, and if you need help, I'll be here to learn with you. And I was familiar with this practice already. And so they did on their own, and I would just check in with them regularly along with my consulting teacher. And they came to me and said, before a decision was made, even over the summer, for high schools to kind of move in this direction, they said, you know, we're really interested in doing this. And these people were our English teachers because they say they have so many papers and they write at length that it is so hard to give proper and meaningful feedback, get it all graded and all entered before they do their next paper. And they said, we're just overwhelmed. We want to learn how to work more efficiently and more effectively. And they think that this practice is going to do that. So they adopted that practice. And then when the district said, hey, you know, are you interested in this? Maybe let's do a pilot. I already had my pilot established. So that's what I have, is I have my 9th grade English teachers who are piloting this officially at Hume Fogg. And so far, so good. They absolutely love it. And so I'm very proud to be a part of this. Thank you for listening.
Good evening, and thank you for having us this evening. I'm Adrienne Koger, the Executive Principal at Antioch High School, and I will share just briefly with you the implementation process at Antioch High School. We are implementing standards-based grading school-wide, meaning across all content areas. So teachers this year will be implementing standards-based grading in at least one of their courses. If teachers only have one prep, they may have chosen to implement across the board. And then if they have multiple preps, they're using some of their classes or maybe all. And I'll be honest with you, those who had a choice chose to go across the board with their standards-based grading practice. Where did we begin? We began last year with the professional learning community, a PLC, around standards-based grading. And we really charged that group of teachers to go out and research and really develop and refine our belief around standards-based grading. From there, we offered internal professional development for all of our teachers. We engaged in a 3-tier process around just the philosophy, the research behind standards-based grading. Also, around content team discussions. My teams all had choice and voice around categories that would be set up for standards-based grading in their grade books, and truly how we would communicate this to students and parents. So we spent a great deal of time in the spring having these conversations in hope for this pilot and opportunity to implement this school year. I will share with you that every student at Antioch High School received a student planner. Inside their planner, we've gone over some key points around standards-based grading, the importance behind it, our beliefs behind standards-based grading, and also their rubrics to which they will be assessed against. I'll share with you some benefits that we came up with as a staff, and it goes along with some of the research you've already heard. Some of the benefits of standards-based grading. Students are given clear learning goals paired with specific feedback about their progress. Students receive specific information about their strengths and weaknesses in a given course so they can prioritize their study time. Students are taught to self-assess and take ownership of their learning. Students are permitted to be reassessed on skills they need more time to master. Parents, students, and teachers can have specific conversations about the educational needs of each individual student. Students are measured against a standard or a learning goal, not compared to each other. Grades have a consistent meaning across all contents and all classes. Final grades are closely aligned to student understanding of the course and material. This year is our first year implementing school-wide. We've been met with great success thus far with our implementation process, and we truly embrace this opportunity to be individual and provide specific feedback to all of our students. So thank you for this opportunity to implement and for listening to us this evening.
Thank you.
Questions?
Ms. Frog.
I have a bunch. So I asked to put this on the agenda. I've gotten a lot of feedback about this, and I'm going to tell you on the front end, I am not an educator, and I don't really understand this whole process, and that's why I asked for it to be put on here. I have gotten a lot of constituent and teacher feedback, and I'm happy to hear from you guys. I'm glad you guys are here to sort of share your experiences. I have to say, most of mine has been negative feedback. And so I'll run through like the complaints I've had, and then I tried to cull it down to a few questions, but that would be my main concerns. And some of those have sort of already been addressed, but so there's a perception among some people in the community that this is a way that we can just increase our graduation rates without necessarily, having higher grades. There's been I've heard of complaints that this allows children to game the system, and that this is a way they can get their grades up without really having to prepare on the front end. The real world consequences has come up. I had one teacher complain that that this is changed, that we made this change a month into the school year at her school, and I don't know if that's typical, which caused problems. I had one person tell me that the principals felt they had to make the change, or some principals did. Obviously, you guys do not feel that way. And then I've heard complaints that this takes away the teacher autonomy in determining how they want to rate their students. So I want just my personal perspective is I completely agree with the idea behind it, that we really want our students to master materials and have grades be meaningful. I agree with this crazy idea that you shouldn't get points for behaviors like bringing materials in the classroom or those sorts of silly things. So to get to my questions without the introduction, these are my concerns about it. First of all, I'm curious as to whether this is something that is being done in a lot of other districts, and I'm curious about how this might affect students when they go to college, because I do agree that you get extra chances sometimes, but also we don't want our students to go to college and think, well, I can not turn in this homework and I'm not going to get a 0, or I get an extra chance to get it right, because college won't be that way. My second, do you mean I can do one at a time, or I just need to run through?
I'm writing.
Okay, sorry. Okay, my second concern is, does it allow students to game the system? And does it penalize children who prepare for the first test and get it right the first time? And then my third concern is not giving zeros for turning in no homework, because I do think that's a behavior that can carry over and have academic consequences later on. And then fourth, public perception about how this is being rolled out. I think we need to address that. And this is part of that process, but I think public perception is, with parents, has been kind of negative.
Sure. Let me address three of them real quickly, and then I'll ask my colleagues here to address which one they feel best. First of all, it was not rolled out a month into the school year. The principals all rolled it out during pre-planning time, and then 2 weeks later, a technical assistance paper came out that could be distributed to teachers at that point to assist in that it was a pilot. It wasn't mandatory to go school-wide with it, that it was a pilot. That was one of the misperceptions that came out when the new policy was approved by executive staff and then given to the principals to actually share with teachers. It didn't say it was a pilot. So that's why 2 weeks later we released a technical assistance paper that was approved by principals before it went out. That's why it took a 2-week period to get everybody, this is the language, this is the consensus around it. The perception that this was a district office top-down, I've heard that too, and of course it gets said a lot that I'm top-down. That was absolutely not the case. This came from this group here. They brought it forward. I was surprised. I was actually meeting with the middle school principals and walked back into the room where the high school principals were meeting, and they told me what they wanted to do. I was like, okay, if you all agree, let's do it. And then I challenged my staff to get the policy written before school started, because if school started and the policy wasn't done, we were not going to implement. So it was done that first week of pre-planning before the kids came back. Public perception, any change is going to be difficult for the public that went through a grading system that we all went through of 0 to 100. I wish we wouldn't have gone 50 to 100. I wish we would have gone 0 to 50. That would have really shaken a lot of people up because I was one of those kids, and I'm sure probably you are too. If I didn't get that 100, I was upset. 99 wasn't going to cut it. So just think if we would have really turned it upside down and go 0 to 50. Who created the 0 to 100 scale anyway as the appropriate grading? 69, that range from 0 to 69 is devastating to kids. If you get that 0, it is devastating. It is hard to recover from that. And I believe it was Megan Barry's husband did a great editorial in the paper about, he did the mathematical equations that show when a kid gets that 0, how many scores of 150 they have to get in order to recover from that, and it's almost impossible. Anybody want to talk about the grad rate increase? All right.
When I look at grad rate, yes, we want to increase our grad rate. But more importantly, I want to have kids that are ready to go to college. And if kids don't know what they don't know how to prepare. We've seen an ACT improvement because kids are getting feedback specific on what do they need to know, how do they need to learn better. So to me, it's not just going to alone improve grad rate, because kids still have to show mastery of that standard. So this alone is not going to change our grad rate. What's going to change grad rate is kids knowing what standards they do and don't know, and giving them opportunities to show mastery, and then for teachers to reteach that content in different ways so that kids get it. So yes, we're going to change our grad rate because our kids are going to know more, because we know specific strategies that they need and skills they need that they're missing. So I'm not looking at it as just a grade. I'm looking at it as something that really is going to transform and empower them to own their learning.
Amy, I'm going to speak to gaming the system because, you know, I've heard that a lot. What you have to understand is that the students who don't do the work the first time or get below an 80% are the ones that have to come back and take it again. And there's an amount of work, additional work they have to do on top of what they did the first time. And if they didn't do any work the first time, that's going to show, and they're going to have to do even more work in between the first and second assessment. And I understand your point about some parents being concerned about their students who prepare the first time and get that. Well, you got to consider that the kids who are doing the retakes, are the ones that are missing out on clubs and some intramurals, things like that, some fun stuff that our other kids get to do, who are doing the work the first time. I think a lot of parents, and this is a lot, Ken O'Connor says this, a lot of our parents are hung up on ranking students. Okay, and so especially when it comes to high school, a lot of parents are concerned about kids being able to retake and retake. But the idea behind this is all students learning and all students being prepared to go to the next level, and that's college. And I get what you're saying about, you know, about not being prepared for college also. But the idea is with these steps between first and second assessment or second and third assessment, however many it takes, teaching the child responsibility. And I think when you have additional work, and you know, the penalty is not a reduction in points, the penalty is additional work, so you become even more versed in whatever subject area you're being tested on. Does that make sense? Do you have any other questions about gaming the system?
No, I mean, I guess what you kind of address is just how will this affect them when they go to college, and these aren't the rules in college, that they get multiple chances. And I'm sort of wondering, one thing I was kind of thinking about when I was thinking about all this is there some sort of compromise where a child that does not make the initial grade, you know, whether somehow the multiple tests will pull down whatever their score is somewhat so that it reflects that they were not prepared the first time. I don't, you know.
Yeah, I mean, right now, the onus of responsibility is that additional work that the student has to do between the first and second assessment. O'Connor says that if we really want this to take hold and change, we even have to go to college and have it change there, because think about it, everybody in this room has had some kind of work that's been turned in late, something you might have forgotten, something that wasn't top shelf. You know, payroll, sometimes I forget to turn my timesheet in. I'm not penalized for that. I'm not, you know, dismissed from my job. So the real world aspect is, the fact of the matter is, more often than not, in the real world, we're given second chances. It's not a one and done philosophy in the real world. I mean, you know, if you miss a house payment or you're late on a house payment, they're not taking your house from you. That's over, you know, a great amount of time. So we have to just kind of get past that mindset. But, you know, like I said, when it comes to rankings and things like that, it's not so much the students' perception that need to change, it's almost the adults, because they, you know, they talk about those rankings of the students, and especially in high school.
Your question is very meaningful to me, and one that that I have looked at and continue to look at, and that my staff and faculty take very seriously. What we feel thus far, those of us who are doing it, and again, we've piloted, and so together we are growing and learning across this year. Those that have adopted it feel very confident in how we've adopted it. And we are looking at personalizing the learning, incorporating quality communication between the family, the teacher, and the student. And we feel that that will improve their college preparedness or college readiness, because in reality, it's going to help them own their own learning, gain the skills to self-advocate around their own learning. Now, I will give you kind of a little anecdotal story for our freshmen who came in. And a lot of people have misinterpreted or used various definitions of what grading for learning or standards-based grading and what are all of the little details. The devil's always in the details. So we assured, now this is for us, but at HumeFog we assured our teachers when we roll this out, because our teachers had the same concern. All right, how are we going to do this and still maintain excellence in academic standards and make sure that our kids are doing what they need to do? And you know, we had to keep reminding ourselves that grades aren't punishment. They're a reflection of their work and learning, what they can do, what they understand, what they know. And so I told them that I would back them and that we would deal with the behaviors from a disciplinary standpoint, because we too want, or at my school, we want to make sure that we're not just teaching them from an academic standpoint, but we're teaching them social skills. We're teaching them those things that they're going to need to be successful in college. Not just that they're smart or that they know a lot or can do a lot, but can you really perform and do well and do what is expected of you? So what we do is our freshman teachers will send the administrators referrals. And the first referral is a warning, and it's disciplinary. So we deal with that from a disciplinary issue, from a disciplinary consequence. If a child is not doing what they're expected to do, then they're not behaving appropriately. We also talk to them from just the learning aspect and with parents as well, because, you know, they're also a little trepidatious about how is this all going to play out. If your child's not doing the practice work, If they're not coming to practice, if you want to think about it like a sports team, and participating, then what feedback is the teacher going to be able to give the child or the parent about the learning? They're not going to be able to give it. I mean, they may say that they're really quiet or sweet or, you know, something that's generic, but nothing that is particular to the learning. And of course, if I get them to college, I certainly want them to have the ACT score, number one, to get them there, the understanding to stay there, and to go ahead and matriculate on and not just get that scholarship and then bail on that freshman year, which a lot of Tennessee students do, unfortunately, and we're trying to make sure that our kids don't do that. So we do it from a disciplinary standpoint. So on this one day, a student came to my office, and I shared with him, you haven't done your work, and your teachers let me know and talked to me about why. We had a conversation, and I said, okay. And I said, well, I need you to do the work. This was on a Friday. I said, I need you to get that work in and bring it into your teacher on Monday. If not, your teacher will talk with me, and then we're going to step it up a little bit because you're going to need more than a little talking to. And so he said, oh, okay. I said, well, do you know exactly what you're missing? Do we need to get on grade speed together? I mean, all of that. We gave him the support. And again, we're doing this intentionally because we're starting with our freshmen, and hopefully they're accustomed to some of that, and we want to really strengthen that foundation for them. So he called Mom, and, hey, Mom, I'm in the principal's office. And then you hear nothing, and then you go, yeah, well, I didn't do my work in my English class. And then you hear nothing, and then you go, well, yeah, I mean, I knew what it was, but I thought it was just practice, so I didn't think I had to do it. But obviously here you have to do all your work. And that's what he said, and I grinned, of course, not letting him see. And he hung up, and I thanked him, and I said, are you going to have it on Monday? And he goes, yeah. He said, I just thought it was practice, so I didn't think I had to. And I said, hon, you're in the game with us every day, and you practice with us every day, and your teacher can't help you if we don't know what you know, and if you don't practice, you're not going to get better, and we want you to be the best that you can be. And he bought into that. He got it, and he got his work back. So that's how we're dealing with that. I hope that's kind of answered your question from our standpoint.
When we began looking into this and having discussions about this, there were several districts that we looked at that were implementing grading for learning or standards-based grading. Some of those are in states across the country. Washington State, they have several school districts that are implementing school-wide, wall-to-wall in their district. Pennsylvania, Quakertown School District. You can Google these. I can send you the information, and you can look at what their extensive websites are. We have some right around our county, and Williamson County is one of them. Fairview High School implements grading for learning. Actually, the principal wrote a book in regards to that. We visited that school. We visited Fairview Middle School that also implements the grading for learning. There's also a school in Wilson County, Southside, who also participates. They can participate in the Power of ICU, which is zapping the zeros, making sure that they defeat student apathy and that all students are completing all assignments. And I think that's a part of this. Also, just to know that there are other counties that are very interested in what we're doing. We've done presentations in Cheatham County and Robertson County, and they're very excited and very are buying into this as well. So that's what we have done and looked at. Okay.
Part of the shared vision for high schools and middle schools is that we will emerge as a trendsetter, and as you can see, we are. So we'll let that wrap that up. Hopefully, we can continue answering any questions you have via email or.
We got one more question. Okay, Ms. Shepherd.
And this might be for Clint, I'm not sure. I think he was the first one that said that he implemented this just with a few teachers as opposed to on all grade levels, wall to wall. Is that right?
We started years before this. This started 3 years at Glencliff, and it was actually already going on at our school. I presented at the faculty meeting and explained what my vision for it was and who wanted to go on it. We actually went to Fairview High School. I took 12 teachers. They saw it. Over lunch, they decided to all come back and start. Then as they started talking, it just grew. And then other teachers were like, well, we see the benefit of it. We want to do it. So then we grew it from the ground up. This was something happening in my building. Teachers saw the benefit of it, and they're the ones that took off of it. So in that meeting Jay's referring to, I was one of the ones speaking up saying, we've got to relook at grades, and this is what we've realized because our teachers were already practicing it in our schools was the most effective way to go about changing it. And he did ask us blank, who's for this and who is not. I did not feel pressure. I did it because it was the right thing for kids in our district. So, and that's why the others voted that way. There was no pressure to go this way at all. If any pressure, it was us pressuring him to give us the autonomy to do
I knew
it.
the response, what there would be.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Clint, if you want to spend a few more times with us, I mean, I think you've been here more than, yeah. See you at the next board meeting. Thank you for that report. Dr. Register.
Madam Chair and members of the board, I would like to thank our high school principals and middle school principals for coming to do this. The next agenda item on the director's report is a hard one. It's a hard discussion, but it's a result of our success. I'll present this very briefly. It's not for your vote tonight, but to get in front of you. You have received in the agenda a proposal to change the pathway feeding into Martin Luther King Magnet High School. And that is to go through a process over the next couple of years of converting Martin Luther King from a grade 7 through 12 school to a grades 9 through 12 school. The first thing I want to say to you and to the viewing audience is that it is a good thing. Martin Luther King Junior High School is a really good school. It's a good thing, and my preference would be not to change anything. But as I said earlier, it's a result of the success that we're having. We have 2 middle schools that are guaranteed pipelines to Martin Luther King for students who meet the academic entrance requirements, and those are Rose Park Middle Magnet School and Head Middle Magnet School. In 2012-2013, all the students at Rose Park and Head who qualified and applied for the school were admitted, and there were, in addition to those applying, 122 county-wide applicants, and this is all grades at MLK, who applied and had seats and were placed in the school. That's 2012-2013. In 2013-14, this year, there were 5 available seats beyond the automatic pipeline from Rose Park and Head Middle Magnet. Let me approach it a different way in terms of statistics. In 2008-9, Rose Park and Head had 160 students that were admitted to Martin Luther King in all grades. In 2012-13, who qualified and were admitted, that's 2008-9, 160. In 2012-13, there were 257 students who applied. This year, the number's down a little bit. It's 206 this year, and I'm not quite sure why the number's down a little bit, but our projection for next year is that there will be 285 students who qualify and are admitted to Martin Luther King from Head and Rose Park alone. Not only are we faced with not having any seats available for students from other schools in the district to attend Martin Luther King, but we're in a position where we will have to have a lottery to admit those students who are in those schools that are direct pipeline. And so that really creates the dilemma. We've been talking about this for some time, but the data really on next year is just becoming available to us now, where we know that we'll have more students qualifying at those 2 schools for Martin Luther King than we have seats, and that we will close out all students from other schools in the county. No seats available unless there happens to be one in an upper grade in a lottery proposal. So the best option that we can come up with, and I'm putting this on the table for your consideration and for public consumption, for us to discuss, not for you to act on tonight. But in very short order, we need, our recommendation is to not place 7th grade students next year at Martin Luther King, to allow that capacity for the upper grades, and then year after next to not place 8th graders at Martin Luther King, and therefore convert Martin Luther King from a grade 7 through 12 school to a grades 9 through 12 school. It will give us capacity to serve those students from Rose Park and from Head Middle who qualify for the pipeline to go, and to have capacity for other students from across the district to be admitted at a 9 through 12 level. Chris Weber has worked a lot on the statistics, and you've received a 3-page document really that shows some of the data. I'm going to ask Chris to come to the microphone because I know you're getting ready to ask me some questions that I can't answer, and I need Chris to help me with that. But the recommendation is going to be, I think the best alternative is to 1 year at a time phase out a grade level, the middle grades at Martin Luther King, convert Martin Luther King to a high school that has greater 9 through 12 capacity, and allow Head and Rose Park and other middle schools the opportunity to feed in for those kids who qualify. And I'll stop with that now and entertain any questions and see what concerns you have.
Ms. Shepherd?
I have a question concerning, Head and Rose Park are both middle schools?
Correct.
5 through 8, right?
Yes.
Okay. Then why are students leaving those 2 middle schools to go to MLK in the 7th grade? I don't understand why wouldn't they want to have a 5 through 8 experience and then have a 9 through 12 experience as opposed to 7 through 12?
Well, let me just clarify. You are correct. Both Head and Rose Park are the 2 feeder schools, but there is a distinguishable difference, and that's the grades in which they have the pathway option. So in Rose Park, you only have the pathway once you're leaving the 8th grade to go into 9th grade. That's not the case at Head. Head, if you're a current 6th grader, you would have had the pathway, or currently without this vote you do. And then you also have the option to pathway into 8th grade. If you're a 7th grader, you could leave in 8th grade. Or if you're an 8th grader, you have the pathway when you progress to 9th grade. So Head has a different pathway continuum, and that's essentially what we're talking about changing. Is when we change the tier configuration at MLK, it would then have the Head students remain at Head through the 8th grade. Now, in this transition, any student that's a current 7th grader, we would continue to honor that pathway for next year into 8th, and we would continue to honor all the 8th grade pathways into 9th. So it would be directly the Head 6th graders this year that would be directly impacted if MLK does not have a 7th grade next year.
Is that it, Michelle? Okay. Any other questions?
To just take that just one step further, if you look at Head's enrollment, which is included in this, we show Rose Park's virtually not affected at all by this. Head is, and that's why we show the proposed enrollments for Head and the implications. Currently, the enrollment at Head is 200 students in the 5th and 6th grade levels. The 7th and 8th grades are then smaller at 100 students, and that's because of that attrition into MLK. This would then allow those students to remain at Head for 4 years like a standard middle school would be.
Any other questions, board members? Mr. Pinkston?
So while we were sitting here, we got an email from a teacher at MLK who's concerned about making the change. And so I don't want to get into all the details of kind of how this process would work and what happens next and when and so forth. I just, want to say this is obviously one of the top 100 public schools in America, and I'd be real reluctant to make much structural change unless we absolutely have to do it. Sort of the classic line of don't fix what's not broken. So I just would encourage extreme caution moving ahead on this. I think it's going to be very controversial depending on kind of how this goes forward.
Dr. Register, may I clarify one point too on the 285 students, the projected pathway of 285 students? Those are based on factual figures that we now have. We know the students that are currently at Head and at Rose Park, and we know the spring TCAP requirements, and we know historically how many of those families take advantage of those choices. So the 285 students that we would expect to take this pathway, that's based on actual data that we now have available to us that we didn't previously have not long ago.
So I guess, Mr. Pinkston, that's the reason I started my remarks the way I did in saying that they're great schools and we would prefer not to do anything. There's no question when we look at the data that something has to change. We either need to change the grade structure or we need to grow the capacity at the schools. Martin Luther King's on a very limited site. There's really not much opportunity and not much way to change that in short order, or we have to start a lottery system for those children that are in those two middle schools that have been feeding. So there's really not a good answer to that, except I have one. The two middle schools that feed Martin Luther King are great schools. Head Middle Magnet is a very high-performing school. And so I think that for the children who are served there and the children who are moving into Martin Luther King, that both options are very good. I know Fred Carr went over to Martin Luther King this afternoon, met with the faculty over there. Chris Weber went over to Head Middle Magnet and met with the faculty over there. So we're just beginning to roll this out to faculty now. Quite frankly, the reason why we're rushed with it right now is I think we need to start the conversation before parents go to the Choice Festival so that we don't surprise parents, so that parents aren't expecting one thing and find out later on after they've made choices or avoided choices that the rules have changed. Now, obviously, you're not voting on this tonight, but the next time the board meets will be after the First Choice Festival. But I think the mistake to make now is to send parents into the First Choice Festival not knowing what's a possibility. So that's the reason why we're doing this as part of the director's report tonight.
Any other questions or comments? Ms. Kim?
I understand that we do have a dilemma. I also hear you loud and clear, Mr. Pinkston. I think it's a tough situation. You said that 206, did I catch that right? 206 people applied for 5 seats this past year?
That are...
Is that right? How many, you mentioned that there were 5
No, there are 206 students who were admitted this year.
Those were the pathway students.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay.
But the 5 students were how many got in countywide.
And how many applied countywide? That's the
countywide, I don't have the total applicant countywide, but it's a large number, like hundreds and hundreds. Like, I don't have the total application count with me right now.
So I think an important, let me draw this comparison. Next year at Martin Luther King, on a county-wide basis, there will be no seats available for students from other elementary schools or middle schools. And an interesting comparison is what happens, what about Hume Fogg? And I asked Chris this today. I didn't have this data point before today, but about 1 in 4 students who qualify and apply for for Hume Fogg get in. So we're talking about two really different standards here for admittance also. And I don't have the actual number for this, but the dilemma is that we have more students qualifying to get in. And that you can see the trend line there. It's every year more students qualify to get in. So that's the dilemma that we face.
With those grades?
Yes.
So I guess for me, it's the problem is manifesting in this particular issue with the triangle of Head, Rose Park, MLK. Well, actually, it's four-sided. It's more of a square because you also have then the district at large. And I feel like that, the fact that there are hundreds of kids on waiting lists to get into MLK, and are hundreds and hundreds, as you say, whatever the number is, hundreds and hundreds.
Several
and then
hundred.
Hume Fogg is hundreds and hundreds as well, 1 in 4. So it's 1 in 4 if you do the math. Yeah, it's hundreds and hundreds. So I guess that's the strategy. So to our earlier conversation about the budget and what we're doing to provide high-quality seats that parents want, I guess that is the big elephant in the room, is just what are we doing about that? And so...
To Head and to Rose Park that were not going there previously. That was one of the reasons that they had the pathway. It was to draw parents and students to those schools.
And that's fantastic. I'm not opposed to that. I mean, I want all Head students and all, Rose Park, but I want all students, not just those who end up at Head and MLK, to have the same opportunity. And so essentially you have a market out there of eager parents, and I don't know why I'm just talking to you, sorry, I don't mean to just point at you, but like eager parents and a community that is really clamoring for MLK, for Hume Fogg, for that quality. And so I feel like that is the interesting strategic question, again, in light of the broader budget discussion for how are we going to provide those kinds of seats. And so we can sit here and play around with the numbers, and I was thinking, is it 6 of one, half dozen the other? Because Head is a great, to your point, it's a great middle school. If they have to stay an extra year, that's not a bad thing. It's just that's not what I'm against. That's what I'm not gonna. I can hear that loud and clear, but I feel like that's missing sort of the broader district-wide point.
So I have a response to that. We have 12 what used to be comprehensive high schools, and they're no longer comprehensive. They have academies, and our high schools now, if you look at the academically accelerated curriculum, we're building that into all of our high schools. We now have 3 IB, International Baccalaureate high schools. We're implementing this year the Cambridge ACE program, 4 IB, 3 IB and 4 ACE, Cambridge ACE academies, and our goal is to build those programs in all of our high schools, and that's really what we're about. Is building high-quality academic programs in all of our high schools. I'll point to Hillsborough High School, a great example of a school that has an IB curriculum that's graduating more kids every year, and it also has that science program in partnership with Vanderbilt that is outstanding. And so that's really, I think if you think about going to scale, if you think about the 17,000 high school students that we have, we can't serve 17,000 in 2 schools. Now, I believe in protecting Martin Luther King and Hume Fogg because they're great schools, but those can't be the only 2 locations for all students who want a great high school program. And so we have to learn how to grow that and how to take it to system level. Yeah.
Here's my response too. I think a lot of it just comes down to perception, and we know that these are magnets and they have really highly qualified children in them. So that makes everyone clamor because we see these great results And we know they're magnets, and so they're a little different than other schools. But I think that a lot of the zone schools sometimes are overlooked and, forgotten in the process. And I tell you, I went to H.T. Hill Middle School last week, and I've been there before, but I really spent some substantive time and visited classrooms, and I was very thoroughly impressed with this school. And so, it is clean. The children were happy to be there, on task. They have fantastic leadership. And you never hear about H.T. Hill Middle School, you don't hear about some of these good success stories that we have. And so this kind of links in, I forgot my most important announcement that I was going to make earlier, which is next Tuesday on the 17th, I'm going to have a community meeting about middle schools. We're going to have lots of people there, including parents and Dr. Register. And it's 6 to 8, and it's going to be at H.T. Hill. But part of the reason I wanted to have this is because I think there is so much fear and there's so much talk about the schools, and a lot of that comes from people who've never been in the schools, they've never visited, they haven't taken their kids, they haven't been public school students, they haven't, they're community members that have sent their kids private, so they don't, and I really think we need to start having those discussions. And I don't think all of our schools are perfect, and I'm not saying that, but I think that there is a lot more good going on that we don't hear about, and all you hear about when, it's like there's a public perception, if I don't get in this magnet, we're dropping out. And they don't even know what, this is a good story example from a parent. A parent recently made that decision without knowing what their zone school was. So I think that's something that, we really need to try to change and have parents become more active in the schools and the community and, to know what's available. So anyway,
I think you're right.
That's my 2 cents.
Basically, that's your point. We've got a lot, we've got great magnet schools, but I think a lot of parents would be amazed at some of the programs that we have in our traditional public schools. It is absolutely amazing when you walk into these schools, just like with you. I've had an experience. I walked into Cane Ridge High School. You go to that high school, you visit the academies, and you are blown away with the technology in that high school. You go to Kennedy Middle School and you talk to these kids and you see how they're learning and you see how these teachers are involved in their everyday learning, and these kids are so excited to be there. It's amazing. It's simply amazing. One of the ways that I can tell when a school is doing really well, have an open house and you can't find parking anywhere 20 minutes before the open house starts. You have so many parents that are getting to those schools wanting to make sure that they are involved in their kids' lives. It's simply amazing. So we've got to do a better job of getting the great stories out, like you said, Ms. Rogue, about the good things that are going on, not just in our magnet schools, but in our traditional public schools as well. So did you get your questions answered?
Not really, but I think, I understand the debate. I just think that this is the strategic challenge of the district. When we look ahead to the 2018 plan and goals and what it's going to take, I think that, I completely hear you, Amy, and I know that there are parents who do that. I also know a lot of parents who actually took painstaking tours. And so I just think that, and this is the core issue, are we providing the quality seats that people want to put their kids in? And at the end of the day, they're going to make choices that are in the best interest of their kids. And sometimes it is like blind, but actually in a lot of cases they're not. They're making very informed choices. And so I feel that, but we can control that. This is what I keep coming back to, is just, getting to the best ideas across charters, traditionals, magnets. What are they doing? Can we loft those ideas? Exactly. And can we actually make sure that they're front and center? The core drivers of academic achievement that causes then parents to want to come to a school, regardless of what it's labeled.
Absolutely. Any additional questions or comments? All right, very good.
That concludes my report.
Fantastic. We will move ahead to committee reports, and as a reminder before we get into committee reports, committee assignments will be made at our next business meeting in October, so please get those committee assignment requests to Ms. Hawkins as soon as possible. Budget and Finance, Mr. Pinkston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I always feel weird when I say the committee met.
Yeah.
It's all of us. So we all met immediately prior to this meeting.
Fantastic. And I don't have a board chair's report tonight, but I wanted to throw a couple of things out. First of all, welcome back, Mr. Majors. Good to see you. And also, we are sending our congratulations and good luck to Miss Spearing as she goes, she is one of 5 finalists in the BAMI Awards, School Board Members Division. And she's up against David Pickler, who I personally think you're going to just win this whole thing. So, it is next week. Is that correct?
It's on Saturday, the 21st.
Saturday, the 21st. It will be in Washington, D.C. And we are sending you all of our luck. And you're going to bring that nice little award home and put it right there on your on your table. So, congratulations on being a finalist and good luck in the awards.
Thank you.
So, any other final comments from board members? Ms. Frobe, you're on.
This meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.